And we are back. Brothers of the Serpent podcast. 3 snakes and 1 long head. Talking about Impossiblocks. So, we done with the Serapium. We're going to move on to core number 7.
We are moving on to core number 7. I mean, we can
critical.
always go back to the Serapium. There's too much to talk about.
That's right.
So to start off core number 7, I think we have to kind of explain feed rate of machining. So the easiest thing to think of is take a stick of butter with a butter knife. And when you cut into the length, so if you're cutting along the length of the stick of butter, when you cut into it, you start having what they call a chip, that sheath coming up from the top of the knife blade.
Yeah. And
it'll curl. It'll start to curl and peel off of that stick of butter as you're cutting through. Now this is how anything we cut ever works. There's always a point where the blade contacts a surface and a point where it starts to cleave in and create that chip.
Yeah.
The thickness of the chip is in relation to what we call feed rate, which is the amount of material removed per cut.
Right.
And so if you're thinking of a lathe where you have a spinning object and you have a blade passing along it, what it's doing is it's creating that chip and then following that chip surface as it cuts.
Yeah.
So and the way they're designed is there's a geometry.
It's like those special apple peelers.
It's like an apple peeler, yes.
Yeah.
And that chip is that apple peel coming off. And you can control that for certain finishes. If you want a real coarse, if you're just trying to cut down metal, you'll have a real coarse feed rate that takes a bunch off.
Yeah.
But because you're taking a big channel out of it as you're cutting through and it's rotating, you're almost leaving a thread pattern in it, which is a rough cut finish.
And if you cut too deep, it can start to
chatter,
chatter,
depending on your tool rigidity, and then it will eventually stall the machine.
Right.
Where you have plunged too deep and it just locks up against the blade and stops.
Yeah. Or the blade breaks.
Yeah. Yes. And so feed rate is the amount of material you remove as you move through the material.
Per rotation.
Per rotation is typically how they do it, yeah. So, when you're cutting aluminum, you're taking off, for a rough finish, you're looking at up to 1/16 of an inch thickness of a chip coming off of that blade as you're cutting through it. Up to fine finishes where you're cutting, 1/1000th to 5/1000ths off.
Right.
And so you're getting a little tiny chip come off. So it's so fine that you're actually cutting more than you're moving laterally so that you don't get those grooves cut in. So if you space it out, you start cutting grooves like in a screw where you have screw threads. Core number 7 is
Now wait, let's talk about feed rate of drills because that's different.
Sorry, yes. So it's kind of one and the same where the cutting blade is at the tip of the drill,
and the grooves of the drill are moving the material out.
Are moving the material up through. The grooves of the flutes are for clearing material out that is coming off of that leading edge. Yes. Yeah. And so all the science is in how precise is that leading edge? How well does it break a chip off and clear it out of the way so that it can continue cutting without resistance?
Right.
And so the same principles work for lathing, for drilling, for machining, for any of that stuff, where you have a certain amount of material you have to clear off, and you have a certain speed in which you have to do it, and a certain finish you have to achieve. And so based on that, you set your parameters so that you're clearing off the perfect amount of material for that surface finish you need.
Yeah.
There is core number 7, which is a granite core sample that was found, I believe, by Petrie.
Yeah.
That is housed in the National Museum in London, and part of their Egypt exhibit and all that.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's kept in the vault or whatever. But it shows, it's a core sample probably about 6 or 8 inches long by what looks like 2 to 3 inches in diameter of granite. And you can see the tooth feed cut marks revolving around that core sample.
Yeah. Like a screw.
Like a screw.
Yeah.
So when you take a core sample, you can see this in any core sample that you make. You can see it with any machining that you do.
So
You can see
a core sample is a hollow drill.
Yes.
Like
yes.
a cup, like imagine a cylinder
Yeah.
that has teeth on the
on the outside bottom
edge.
edge of the cylinder. Yes.
Right.
And as it cuts down, it's the core is like actually going inside the cylinder of the drill.
Right.
And
So
then
the core sample is actually that thing broken out of the original hole.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. From the inside of that auger blade.
Right.
Right.
This core sample has a feed rate of approximately 0.1 to so a tenth to an eighth of an inch per revolution.
And it's granite.
So we typically, you know, when I was cutting aluminum the other day, it was an RPM around 1400 with a depth of cut no larger than a 16th of an inch, let's say.
Yeah.
So you're taking a 16th of an inch cut, but you're moving at 1400 RPM. So you don't have much time for that thing to come back around. So you're not forming a very thick chip at all.
Yeah.
You're talking maybe 5/1000ths of an inch thick chip.
Right.
We're talking an eighth of an inch chip
Per revolution.
per revolution out of granite.
I have a question. So do we actually?
And that's with a hollow drill. That's the other
That's
thing.
with a hollow drill.
Do we know? Do they have the hole as well as the core?
They have some holes.
They have some holes.
So what I'm
yes.
wondering is what was the thickness of the blade? Because like let's imagine it was a 1/4 inch thick. So your
Well, here you go.
whole diameter would be a 1/2 of an inch longer than your core diameter.
Right.
If you had a 1/4 inch thick blade on
and that's what I wanted to bring up is that in some of those core holes that they found, you can see where they broke off the core sample.
Yeah.
And the stump of the core sample is sticking up above where the blade dug in.
was dug in, so you
Yes.
can see the thickness of the blade in there.
Right.
And how thick was it?
I don't have measurements.
That's about 1/16 of an inch, and the core is about 8 inches across.
Okay, so it's about a 16th to an eighth of an inch thick blade.
Yeah.
Right. Cutting an eighth of an inch per revolution, into granite.
Yeah, we don't have.
We can't do that with carbide and aluminum today. With the technology, we can't. You don't move material like that.
Yeah. Can't move material that
You
fast.
can't move material that
Yeah, what
fast.
kind of like? How is it moving the material out of the hole?
No one knows.
Riddle me that, Batman.
So some of the theories, like Dunn has put forth several, and once again he goes into the problem with granite in that you have all these different materials. And here's the other thing he talked about. So when they did this in Aswan granite, which again, like we said, was 55% quartz or rock crystal, the feed rate was actually higher when the blade was cutting through quartz than it was when it was cutting through softer material.
Which is completely bass-ackwards from what it
right.
should be. Yeah.
That's right. Totally the wrong way around. So he theorizes that it was actually the cutting action was some kind of ultrasonic vibration.
Resonation, yeah.
And so that when it hit the quartz and it resonated with that quartz, it
rang
moved
with
through
it,
it like
yeah.
way
Like they
faster.
tune it. They tune the resonance
Yeah.
to match the stone that they're cutting.
Yes.
Yeah. And you know,
But with granite, it can't be as much because it's so many different materials. So
Right.
you got to pick
You
like
tune it to the hardest thing in the granite.
the hardest thing, or you pick a good happy
good
medium.
Yeah.
So that the spinning action of the drill would have been purely to remove material.
Or you could even make it I'm sorry to like just nerd out on this resonance stuff, but you could actually resonate it with a complex waveform that matched multiple resonances.
You just
simultaneously.
You just have to make sure that waveform also doesn't resonate.
Destroy the
with
bit.
the blade.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So you would need to make the resonance not match the material of the bit.
Yeah.
So that, but work with the stone. So you'd have to pick your bit material very carefully.
Yeah.
depending on what you were cutting, which we do.
Like InRes.
Which we do, and
Yeah.
we have
if you use InRes,
yeah, InRes.
yeah, InRes is like one of the least resonatable materials.
As opposed to Invar bits, for sure.
They don't move.
I really wish I had. I'm gonna go back and find this, but I'm gonna get from one of the podcasts where we had Brenner on, where he says shimmer.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna get shimmer out of there. So like whenever we're talking about this kind of stuff, I can hit the soundbite button.
Boom.
Yeah.
It's like, what were they using? Shimmer.
Yeah, shimmer.
I mean, and you look at the blocks in Sakura and all in Serapium. There's no way in our technological standards to do that stuff.
Yeah.
The only thing you can do is hypothesize on
Right.
how they're actually being cut. And a lot of it, I think there is an partially uncut stone in one of the museums in Cairo that matches one of the blocks in the Serapium.
Yeah, the type
where
of
they've
block.
started cutting the lid off, and you can see it peeling up like that stick of butter.
Yeah.
And then it just snapped off.
Right.
And just left it there.
They just quit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
Because
it's-
when you got two guys with a long rope with some diamond chips on it,
you just quit.
you quit.
80 years in, you quit.
Yeah. You dug too far. It got so another thing they have in some museum. I don't know if this is in the Cairo Museum or if this is in London, but they have a big block like that, and it's turned to the side so that the cut edge, the slot
Vertical.
is on the top, and you can see that they got off line. That they wanted to cut a straight line, and then it started going this way,
Going sideways.
and they cut like 8 or 9 inches
Sideways.
past
Yeah.
where you would have long stopped if you were hand cutting. And Dunn talks about that too. He's like, look, if you're hand cutting, I don't see how they could get this far out of
Into
whack
it
before
and
you
say,
stop.
Okay, we're scrapped. Yeah.
The speed of the tool determines the length, the size of the mistake, right? So like if you're using if anybody who's cut wood with like a little jigsaw,
Yeah.
that blade's going up and down real fast, and you can easily get off, and then you're like, oh shit, and you cut 2 or 3 inches off, and then you're like, and you have to throw that piece of wood away and start over because you've cut too far to start over with that piece of material.
Yeah.
Where if you're hand cutting, you immediately see that you're starting to get off, and you stop, and you're like, wait, whoa,
correct
okay,
it.
You correct.
And you can see those correction marks in the cut.
Yeah.
Where you deviate and then come back on.
Right.
main
Yeah.
cut.
If you don't go back and polish it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With sand.
Yeah.
So you were talking about the way they etch the granite today with the water
Yeah.
torch,
Yeah,
the water
right,
jet.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Is there a possibility that they could have been actually making that core with like an extremely fast
Water jet
circular
spinning?
water jet? So like imagine you have
that would blow the material
Imagine you have
out of
your
the-
core bit, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And you have like flutes coming up the round, so what we call hole saws,
Right,
in construction industry.
Yeah.
But it's got a single jet or maybe 2 jets,
That are spinning. Yeah.
and they're say opposite, and that thing is spinning, and so it's actually cutting that groove, but the bit's moving down, and so that the jet is 1/8 of an inch above the rock that it's
Right,
blowing
right.
out. All the pressure and everything is blowing it out.
That's an interesting concept, and I'm curious because when you water jet things, there's an obvious taper to any hole or any
Yeah.
cut that you make.
Yeah.
Where on the side where the cutter is, it's clean and precise, and then on the back side you have a blowout.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other
Where-
problem you would
where
have
it's
now
tapered.
now that I think about it is friction loss. If you only had an 1/8 inch thick blade, that's how thick your tube of water is.
Yeah.
And so if you had a core that was 2 feet long, you're
Right.
trying to put that, pressure through a tiny little
pinpoint down. Yeah,
Yeah.
you
It
can't
wouldn't
do
even
it, no.
the friction loss inside that tube would be too high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Skirp derp my own theory, guys. See that?
Man. Yeah, and it's astounding to actually think about the numbers and the material removal rate of some of these pieces.
Yeah.
And how much they were able to cut into what we consider solid rock.
Yeah.
The solidest of the solid rock on our planet.
Right. Only thing harder, I think, is andesite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're cutting it away at 1/8 of an inch per revolution.
Right. It's ridiculous.
Which asked me to do that with aluminum, and I'd run away screaming.
Right, because
scared.
Things are going to shatter and stuff's going to fly apart.
Things going to blow up.
Right. Yeah. So let's talk about the Ramses statue.
Oh well, one more thing, real quick. What was the force? I'm sorry, because Dunn had talked about this, and I can't remember what it was, but the actual downward pressure, the force that would have to be put on a traditional, like say, diamond edged
rotating
hole saw to actually get that feed rate. It was like some ridiculous amount, like
I can't remember.
Yeah, it was multiple tons. Yeah.
Show observer.
Yeah, all right, we'll come back to that. But yeah, that was the other thing. It's just like, what material?
The immense amount of force.
What 1/8 inch thick material could even hold up under that amount of down force? Like
to take that initial plunge into that material.
right.
Yeah.
So, all right, what were you gonna say?
The Ramses statue.
Right.
So you want to talk about
I've done a little bit of research. I haven't done a whole lot on it. But I think the fascinating thing about these statues is the reproducibility of symmetry between the faces.
Yeah.
And also the perfection of the symmetry in the faces themselves.
Yeah.
And the complexity of the three-dimensional curves that the cheeks and chin and the eyes and the eyebrows form.
Yeah.
And how perfect they are one to the next. It doesn't lend any credence to a handmade
And the
artifact.
similar radii.
Yes.
Of the
co-similar radii and in the features of the faces
Right.
themselves. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so if you think about it from a manufacturing standpoint, if you're trying to make something, you want to do it in as few cuts as possible.
Yeah.
So you want to, if you're cutting all these circles, you want to use the same radius tool for everything that you can. So you don't have what we call...
keep changing out bits.
You don't have a tool changeover.
Right, yeah.
Which, if anything takes down time in manufacturing, it's a tool changeover. 'Cause
Yeah.
the more things you can do with one tool, the faster you can do it.
Right.
And so...
I'm familiar with that with drawing.
Yes. The less you have to change out that pencil, the
That's
faster
right.
you can draw.
That's right. I draw everything with a 0.3.
There you go. 0.7 for the eyebrow.
That's right.
It's core sample number 7.
So, one of the things that Dunn did, which was he gave a presentation on that statue. I don't know if you're going to talk about this, but where he basically they had a picture and he cuts the picture in half and then takes one side and just flips it over onto the other side.
Yes, I've seen that. Yes.
Yeah. And it
It's
merges
a
perfectly.
Perfect mirror image.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if you're looking at the face front on, if you cut it vertically straight down the center of the nose, and then you have like two halves of the photograph, you can take one half of it and flip it over and lay it on the other side, and they merge seamlessly. You can't even tell, which means that that one side of the face is a perfect exact mirror image of the other side of the face, which, like he says, you can't do by hand.
You don't do that by hand.
Right.
No. And
this is a colossal statue.
Yes.
The statue of Ramses.
4 of them.
Yeah. They're
It's not
enormous.
just one. There's 4 of them, and they're like 150 feet tall. They're huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's that's another point he brings upon, is that like you can't you have, even in today's age, you have places in a construction site where things are machine made,
Yeah.
and places on a construction site where things are man made and man done.
Right.
And all of that is not just division of labor, it is division of working power and amount of time it takes to do a certain job.
Yeah.
And the final end goal. How much is it worth precision-wise and man-time-wise to do it this way versus this way?
Yeah.
So we don't do things the hard way just because
It's
you're
possible.
supposed to do it the hard way.
Okay, so there's artists that do things the hard way.
Right.
because the end result is so amazing and mind blowing.
Right, like
But you can't-
hand hammer brass and shit like that.
Right.
You can't.
And even like the marble sculptures from Rome and stuff that are just polished, like they're just amazing.
Yeah.
But still, those are not construction sites. When you get to a stone carving that's 150 feet tall, this is a construction project. Like
Yes,
this is a
that is
major,
a major undertaking.
Yeah. So it's one thing for an artist who's making a piece of art, and it's usually a single guy, a single person, and they will go to untold, lengths or whatever to reach some specifics in their work of art that is ridiculously hard, and that's one of the things that makes it so awesome. But on that scale, it's like this requires a crew. Like this is not a one-man job.
Right. And at that point, it requires a crew that can do everything the same exact every time.
Right.
All the
so
time.
when you're looking at like similar things in modern times would be like the Large Hadron Collider.
Right.
All of the precision and everything that has to be in every aspect of that entire structure, all of the materials, all of the instrumentation, and that's a huge, massive group of people all doing this. It's both high technology and a work of art, high precision,
and a man-made work of art.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's also got a very specific purpose.
Very
Right. And this is a
specific,
statue, right? Like this is
Right.
a carving. So
Yeah.
it's weird, to think about that. Like another, I guess you would say a modern comparison would be some of the like Mount Rushmore. What's the Crazy Horse?
Yeah, Crazy Horse.
Crazy Horse.
Carvings but it's like still one family.
Yeah,
or something.
Crazy Horse is like one family. Yeah.
that has been working on this thing.
For generations.
Right, and when you get up close, you're never going to see that type of precision.
No, you
'Cause this
still
guy's
have
suspended on-
chisel marks on the
Right.
front of it. Yeah.
This guy's suspended on, ropes and stuff with.
Ding, ding,
Yeah.
ding, 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 ding,
Yeah.
ding, up there. Yeah. Whereas these are exactly the same, and there are no chisel marks
Yeah.
on them.
Yeah.
There's no stray. Oh, I accidentally knocked that corner off. Oops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that nose is going to be a little different. No, it's
Any rock climber out there that's like 150-foot cliff.
yeah.
That is a long way down.
Yeah.
buddy.
And then you got to be up there
Carve it with
doing
perfect
all
precision.
the precision. Yeah.
Or they did it on the ground and stood it up, which is another different hard thing to do. It's a different kind of hard thing
Yeah.
to do. Like if you had it laying down on
Is
the
it a
ground,
single stone, or was it built?
they're colossal, so they're
I thought the Ramses ones are cut out of the wall.
Oh, they're cut out of a wall.
I believe
okay.
so, right?
yeah, you're right. They're rock cut.
I'm trying to remember the name of not Phoenix, the area, the town they're near.
Oh, I
they're-
don't know. Yeah,
They're cut out of the wall. of
Yeah,
that
so it's rock
canyon.
cut.
Yeah, it's rock cut.
yeah, you're right. So they weren't laying on the
Yeah.
ground, but there are statues that are like that have the same kind of precision that. I've seen pictures of them laying on their backs because they're
Yeah,
being.
they never
somebody's-
got them up, or
Yeah.
they toppled them. Yeah.
Well, no. I mean, they're laying on their backs now. I don't know what but one of them's in a big building, and there's no way to stand it up, right? So I don't know if it was ever stood up in antiquity or not, but it's laying on its back now, and you can look at it and you can see the face, and it's enormous,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you can go into the building where it's undercover, being protected from
Yeah.
the elements or
Yeah.
whatever, and it's just laying on its back, and it's just gigantic.
Okay, here's from the Watcher going back a little bit. In drilling granite, diamond drills rotating at 900 revolutions per minute penetrate at the rate of 1 inch in 5 minutes. This works out to be 0.0002 inches per revolution, meaning that the ancient Egyptians were able to cut their granite with a feed rate that was 500 times greater.
That's astounding. That's absolutely astounding. Like
Yeah.
we're cutting it at a tenth of the diameter of a human hair,
Yeah.
and they were cutting it at an eighth of an inch per revolution.
It's ridiculous. Shamir.
Well, that's why there's all yeah Shamir.
Any weird cutting stuff? Shamir.
I mean, at the same time, that kind of feed rate explains the stray cut marks
Yes.
You don't have stray cut marks unless it's easy to cut.
Right. And some of the cutting, what would you call them? Just, I don't know, like I saw this great thing the other day on online. Somebody had posted pictures of some of the back, right? So okay, on the Giza Plateau, we've mentioned this before on the podcast. Some of the plateau was. Oh, okay. Do we need to take a break? Yeah, we need to take a break. I'll come back to this. What?
I was trying to give you the silent signal so you could finish your thought.
No, middle of a thought.
Yeah, it can't. It never works. I hold up the hourglass, and he's like, just
Let's take a break.
all right, folks.
Snakes.
You know the ropes. To your one-stop shop for everything ancient rocks. We got the engineer in the tangent cube with us talking about tolerances. We are very tolerant here at Brothers of the Serpent Podcast.
Tiny tolerances.
Tiny tolerances. Not hating. But we're pretty sure it wasn't dudes in butt flaps with copper chisels.
That's right. That's right.
So wait a minute. Now, way back to first segment, you just mentioned this. Like, while you were looking at those serpentine effigy mounds in New York, you're following your compass on your phone, and it just starts spinning all the way around. Like, why did you leave that out of the first segment?
So I totally forgot about it. Shame on snakes.
Shed your skin right now.
I was walking around the side of that mountain, and I'm trying to triangulate my position based off this point I had put on the Google Maps, and I'm sitting there watching, just literally standing there on the side of this mountain watching my phone and the position that Google Maps is showing me that my phone is pointing.
Yeah.
And because it'll show you that little blue cone showing which direction you're pointing. And several times I stopped moving and just to take my bearings and compare between the two maps I have. And the blue cone on my Google Maps would just sit there and slowly go in a circle once or twice and then finally lock in on a direction.
So that's cool because a lot of, like, it just makes me think of the Serpentine Mound in Ohio.
Right, and
which
the
is built on top of a
magnetic
magnetic
anomaly,
anomaly, okay? So bam.
Right.
All right.
And speaking of the Serpentine Mound, I was doing some reading on that the other day, and one thing I didn't know is that the astronomical alignments, I always say that wrong, the astronomical alignments of the Serpent Mound are actually more precise than Stonehenge.
Oh, wow.
It's
Wow.
phenomenal to me. It's like, holy cow, I did not know that.
Wow.
Holy snakes.
Holy snakes.
That's freaking awesome.
Yeah.
Dude, you know,
See, they should have built Snakehenge.
Snakehenge. Imagine how many hippies you would get every solstice.
I'm pretty sure, folks, we've definitely got the number one candidate for guest host for Brothers of the Serpent podcast. If we are, hanging on the spikes inside of an ancient tomb and
Can't do a podcast one week.
We might have to,
Hey,
call Brenner
guest
over to the
host.
house
Heck
and
yeah,
you guys
we'll,
just
strike up another late night.
knock it out. Oh, that's awesome. All right, so where were you going with your
Yeah,
thought?
all right, so-
I so rudely interrupted you with the
No, it's
with
not.
the
It's totally not rude. Totally not rude.
Chronos struck.
So, when it comes to precision cutting of these stones or whatever, like the Giza Plateau itself was a limestone plateau. Some of it was higher, like some of it was sticking up basically above where the level of the plateau is now, and other parts were eroded down below the level of the plateau now. So somebody at some point in ancient times came along there and cut off all the high parts okay, to make it flat. But then the parts that were still eroded below the level they wanted, they filled with basalt slabs.
Yeah, which happened to be perfectly flat with the top of the platform.
But the bottom is cut to the contours of the erosion of the limestone.
Like they poured in the basalt.
Right.
Yeah.
And they did, and they did something similar with the Sphinx temple.
Yes.
The eroded limestone blocks that were taken out of that had been at one point removed from the Sphinx enclosure. The Sphinx enclosure. Little Robert Shock.
Little Robert Shock window there for you.
They were set in, to the Sphinx temple, and that was then heavily eroded later.
Yeah.
And they fitted
Somebody came along later and fit granite
polygonal
stones
Into that eroded
and
rock.
fit the back sides of the front side of the granite is all flat and smooth, and the back sides of the granite are fit to the contours of the erosion pattern of the limestone blocks behind it. And
the limestone core blocks.
But
this is obviously-
that erosion pattern wasn't there before.
Obviously, Shamir.
yeah, and that's also a great argument for the age of the Sphinx, because that the blocks that they removed from the Sphinx enclosure were not eroded when they removed them.
Right.
So it's like their place.
That's also what I think is a great argument for 3 eras of construction. The original was the original gigantic megalithic, some of them are 400 tons, core blocks pulled out of the enclosure of the Sphinx, and they built the original, what is called the Sphinx or Valley Temple, in front of it, out of these gigantic megalithic core blocks.
Yeah.
And then a lot of time passed, or incredible torrential rains for some long period. Either like the shock,
even with the rainfall, it had to be a long period.
right?
Yeah.
So either a very long time passed, or a long period of incredible torrential rains that was almost unending.
Yeah.
Either way.
A somewhat less long period
Yeah.
with unending torrential rain.
Right. 1,000 years of unending torrential rains, or hundreds of thousands of years, or maybe tens of thousands, whatever. It's hard to tell how much the erosion would happen to the limestone if it was an arid place.
Right.
So you would need some kind of rainfall. Anyway, all this time passes after the initial construction of that core temple, and then somebody later comes along with still anomalous, but not as anomalous, or maybe anomalous in other ways, abilities to construct things, and builds a sheathing for the Valley Temple in granite. Okay.
It matches that worn line.
Not as megalithic.
Yeah.
The blocks aren't as heavy. But the difficulty in that is what they did with the stone, and that it was granite instead of limestone. Right. And then the next period of building is what I think was the dynastic Egyptians. Much later.
What we classify as.
Right. The dynastic Egyptians, and like, so in South America and Peru.
And still amazing.
Yes, fantastic with the dynastic Egyptians, but I think they learned from these structures that were on this plateau. So, in my opinion, the plateau of Giza was cut flat out of pure limestone. There was no eroded part when they first cut it flat. The eroded
just
part was
solid
sheathed
metal,
later. That eroded part that was covered in the basalt was done by the people who sheathed the Sphinx temple, right? So the same torrential rains or whatever it was that eroded the Sphinx core blocks for the Valley Temple is what also caused that massive eroded, those huge eroded parts of the what was originally a flat, smooth limestone plateau.
Right.
I would also say there's an argument for the longer period of time with less torrential rainfall.
I would agree.
Because in that depression of the Sphinx enclosure, if you had enough torrential rainfall, it's going to fill up, and therefore you have no more erosion.
Yeah.
You have sediment taking place.
Building up.
Because
Right.
once it's a pool, then you've got
sediments,
calcification or whatever on the surfaces of the stones. So if it was just constant torrential rainfall, that thing would have never drained,
Right.
and you would have never had
Yeah.
the erosion. So to me, you have to have little enough rain to where it's not filling up and it's constantly running down the sides.
Yeah.
Which extends the period of time it must take.
Well,
Yeah.
the show observer was saying, floods on floods on floods.
Yeah.
where you have periods of extreme wetness and then dryness, and where they
Right.
can go and patch stuff up, and then extreme periods of wetness again to
Yeah.
cut limestone out and
Yeah.
wash all this stuff.
He's also suggesting that the second period of construction shows advancement because they built it out of granite, which won't erode like the limestone
Right,
did.
right,
But
right.
that, to me, I also think maybe that the people who built the initial thing did not know that there was going to be. They didn't know that there was going to be this. Like, basically, I think that a lot of that erosion was caused by cataclysms.
Pre-diluvian.
Yeah.
Yes. Like large impacts that cause huge
Well, I mean,
amounts
the,
of
the people that constructed it were
antediluvian.
Yeah, antediluvian. I'm sorry.
Yeah. They were antediluvian.
Gotta
They were,
get my snake terms correct.
Well, I mean, and you look at the plateau itself, and the plateau itself is a feat of engineering.
yes.
It is, show observer, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's level within a quarter an inch.
Yes, all the way across. And it's
all the way across, which is hundreds of acres.
Yeah. Many square miles.
Yes. You're absolutely massive
It's leveled to a
land mass.
flat. It's leveled at, like they went up there and cut it flat to within a quarter of an inch all the way across it in any direction you care to measure.
Is there a? I was gonna say.
And then whoever put the basalt on there
No curvature?
matched that.
Match that. I don't know that. That's an interesting question. Does it match the curvature of the Earth in any way?
You know what I'm saying? Come on, guys.
Is it perfectly flat?
we can get into
The world's flat, guys.
Oh yeah, that's right. BT Dub, it's flat Earth. So.
flat Earth.
There's no curve.
That's right.
Except what we put into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Putting a curve on the plateau would have been fake news because the Earth isn't curved.
Oh, where's my fake news button?
Anyway, I thought it was hilarious that somebody had taken, like, there are places now where you can sort of, because for whatever reason, some of the basalt slabs have been, they were lost or they were
Right,
pulled out of
right.
the, so there are places where you can sort of drop down into the eroded part of the plateau and get pictures of where the contours match.
Yeah.
Right. And then there's these incredible saw marks that are in the basalt
It's
too.
just like, that's,
But you see
that's
this like
circular saw
you
slip.
see this like perfectly flat plane and it's black rock and then it just merges perfectly into this white limestone and then beneath it there's this like contoured eroded cut where these black slabs just perfectly fit it and somebody was like, them fuckers are just showing off. That's what he said. And it's kind of like, so what I was getting at was that it seems like it was easy.
Well, yeah. I mean, you look at construction today. Unless there is an absolute reason for doing it the difficult way, we don't do it the.
We do it the
difficult way.
easiest way
We do it the
to fit the
easiest way
function
to fit the function
of whatever it is.
exactly.
Right. So form follows function. You do it the hard way, but it's not really the hard way. It's the easiest way possible
Right,
to
or
fit
the
the function.
cheapest way. You'll
Right,
even
right.
see
Those two things are the same
examples
thing.
of precision in manufacturing where you don't necessarily need that kind of precision, but you're already making that part, and to achieve that precision is cheaper than, say, cast molding it
Yeah.
or whatever.
Right.
So just through the fact that the process of making that part is cheaper, you get a more accurate part than what is actually necessary.
Yes.
And so there's the economics of all that driven into it.
In
as
other words,
well.
it's easier.
It's easier,
Yeah.
financially
Cheaper-
as well.
cheaper or easier are kind of the
easier.
same.
Exactly.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Yeah. At the end of the day, they're the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because money is a value of difficulty in some ways.
Exactly,
Yeah. Yeah. So, like, that's the idea, and you get this. So, like, let's go. Like, we got the last segment here. Let's talk about the Baalbek Impossiblocks because
Yeah.
So, like, talking about
the big boy.
the big boys. Talk about something that is incredibly difficult to understand in terms of why did they do it this way?
Yep.
Are those blocks like? The only answer anyone's ever been able to come up with is because it was easy for them.
Yep.
Crickets. I mean, you look at those blocks, and you look at those blocks, and the first thing you're struck by is the immense weight of them.
Right.
And the Stone of the Pregnant Woman,
Yeah.
which is the classic one, is the lightest of the ones that we've dug up.
Yeah.
The ones underneath it,
Are
and there
much
are
bigger.
separate blocks underneath it.
Yeah. They stacked the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, which was for a long time the largest known cut block ever in the world ever, is actually stacked on top of 2 blocks that are much bigger
Yes.
than it is.
I think the other 2, the Stone of the Pregnant Woman's like 600 tons or somewhere around.
No, it's way more than that.
Is it
1,200?
Okay, because the biggest one's like 1,600.
Yeah. Yeah,
But then
16 to 1,800
Yeah.
estimated
Yeah.
that no one has any idea how to
And
actually
it's
figure
just
out.
underneath the other blocks that they could move and stack on top.
Yeah.
It's almost like an afterthought.
Right.
Oh, we might need this other one. Let's just cut it out now and stack it up.
So I've been listening to the audiobook of Technologies of the Gods by David Hatcher Childress. And he's talking about the stones in Baalbek and in the quarry. The Stone of the Pregnant Woman, I think, is the one he's speaking of specifically when he was quoting a archaeologist who had come up with a couple of ideas about how they might have moved it. And one of the ideas was that there were like wooden rollers, like logs that they would place underneath. I think it was something like 1 meter apart,
Right.
each log. And assuming that the stone wouldn't crush the logs, which it would, completely grind them to a pulp.
Yeah. As soon as
But-
even if
as
they
soon as
didn't
you start
initially, as soon as
rolling.
you start trying to roll it, it would
Right, but assuming that they stayed together,
yeah.
if the all of the logs were sitting on a perfectly flat paved road that could handle all of the weight without being crushed as well, it would take 80 tons of force to just move it,
Just
to
start
roll it along the
rolling,
rolling laterally, like not up a slope. Now there's like a mountain range between where the quarry is and where the actual
Yeah,
site of
there
Baalbek
is
is,
no
where
road.
the
With no
Trillathon-
paved road. No paved road.
road.
No road at all.
But even if there had been a road that is completely eroded, it would be going uphill. So I was like thinking, okay, just imagining this flat road. You need 80 tons of force. So I just
Lateral force, yeah.
yeah, lateral force to push it along the rollers. So I did this quick little calculation, and it would basically take 800, the full weight of 800 200-pound men to move that stone. So they would have to. You can't get 800 guys against the back of the stone or any side.
Yeah.
So they would have to have lashed it with multiple ropes. And even if, say, 2 guys put 400 pounds on one rope, like you'd have to, your rope technology, number one, would have to be pretty awesome.
You got to be up to par on your rope.
You got to be up par on your rope technology. So if there was 2 guys per rope, you'd have to get 400 ropes around the log. And then that's still considering around the block. And that's still considering that they're all in a straight line, that
Right.
all of their pulling force is perfectly in a straight
direction.
line.
Yeah. Once they start fanning out,
Once they fan out, they've gotta pull
force angle
harder.
Changes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? And then they have to equal the force or the block is going to turn. It's just you'd have to have a massive road.
And a
Because these
massive
guys,
army.
in order to
Yeah.
put 200 pounds of force on a rope, you'd be leaning back. And if you were not on a road, you're digging in or slipping. It's
Yeah.
just like, this is unreal.
And that's on flat ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On flat ground,
Yeah.
Not over a mountain range. And then not even
And also
considering
remember-
stacking it.
Right. Then
Or
you
how
got
do
to lift it up and put it on top of the previous block you brought.
Okay, and then it comes down to this. How do you get the end on the first roller?
Yeah.
You have to lift the
You
stone.
have to pick it up to put it on the first
Well,
one.
I'm a sculptor up here and say, and I just sculptor
pivot.
myself, sculptor. But I was gonna say you dig underneath and put the.
And then
log
what are they
underneath.
rolling on?
Then you got to roll
Exactly.
it up.
But then the surface underneath isn't structurally strong enough to hold anything.
Or if
Right.
it is, you got to roll that block up out of that hole you did.
right. Or dig out the hole.
But then the block falls down.
But then the block falls down. Yeah.
You dig tunnels under the block. Well, first you have to dig completely under the block, right? Like you just completely dig out under the block totally, so that the block's levitating, and then you pave a road.
Make sure it's levitating.
You make sure it's levitating, and you pave a road underneath it.
Logistics.
That's
folks.
before you pick it up,
logistics,
right?
The other thing you have to remember is if you're doing a rolling log scenario, even assuming, let's say that we have Impossiblocks that won't break, okay?
Impossible.
And we're using Impossiblocks to move the Impossiblock. To harness the block in rope, you cannot put any ropes going underneath the block.
They all
have to
They
go
all
around
have
the
to go
sides.
around it all the way around. You
And
cannot.
it's only like 10 or 13 feet tall, or
Yeah, well, they're huge. I mean, I think it's 16 to 19 feet tall.
okay.
But still, like, you need a lot of rope going only one way around the. You can't wrap it the other way.
Right.
You can't at all.
Right.
Otherwise, your
Right.
your Impossiblocks are rolling over your Impossible rope and breaking.
You have a 20-foot block and 400 ropes. That's a 20th of a foot per rope.
Yeah.
400 rope, and in each rope has a tensile strength of at least 400 pounds.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So one of the fun
This
things
is before nylon, right?
So one of the fun things I did, like, to try to illustrate this problem was we were talking about some archaeologists had proposed that that 6,000 people putting their combined forces on various apparati, various harnesses and all kinds of things.
Jesus Johnson giving us facts and meters. What,
What is this?
What is this? We're comparing this block to the speed of light here, watcher.
that block will never change shape.
20.3 to 20.7 meters long, 4 meters wide at the base, 4.14 to 5.29 meters wide at the top, 4.21, 4. Numbers are hard,
Yeah.
especially when you're
60
listening.
feet long, 16 feet tall, 19 feet wide, something like that. Maybe
come
it's something else. But the point was that they were suggesting about a crew of 6,000 people, right? So I went on the internet to the Oracle, to the Google, and found a photograph of 6,000 people at some kind of conference.
Yeah.
Right, where they had put everybody in and it was a giant.
Conference room.
It was a big stadium or something that they were in, like a gymnasium or something like that. 6,000 people in there, and I put that up and I was like, "How do you get this many people?" And you have to see the picture. 6,000 people is a lot of freaking people. How do you get that many people around a block that's only 60 feet long and whatever? It's just not. It's once you see what 6,000 people looks like, you realize, okay, this is not.
And
feasible.
then how do you get all those people up a ramp?
Yeah. Well,
the
once you
other
get
side.
it, let's say that you've got a perfectly flat road getting to the and it's a mile away from the site, right? Or a kilometer or whatever. Once you get it there, now you have to cantilever it up 60 feet off the ground.
Yeah. To get it on top of the previous block.
Right.
Well, going back to this too, like you were talking about 6,000 people,
Yeah.
800 200-pound guys is 80 tons.
Right. Just 80 tons. Yeah.
Just 80 tons
Yeah.
on your
Road.
air quotes road or ramp.
Right.
All right, so the group of guys that is going to pull the 2,000 ton thing, they weigh 80 tons as well.
Yeah.
So it's like, what the hell?
I was thinking about this one day when I was driving home from work or something like that, and I was like, I like the whole what is that in family sedans?
Yeah. The
'cause
family
people are
sedan.
always comparing giant blocks to
Yeah.
that's like 400 family sedans, or right, or whatever.
That's my shtick.
Right. How many families? What is that in family sedans? Right. What is that in T-Rexes? As you guys
Yeah,
said in
exactly.
late night.
Yeah, that's a good
How
one.
many T-Rex?
How many T-Rexes is one Impossiblock at Baalbek? But I was thinking about Walmart parking lots, right? What is the average capacity of a Walmart parking lot?
Right.
And I never went and figured this out, but it would be great to like it would take 3.5. It's like that block weighs the same as 3.5 Walmart parking lots full of cars.
Oh my god.
Plus the parking lot itself.
And I need to go figure that out and give you guys the weight of the Baalbek blocks in Walmart parking lot.
Well, and then you got to
cars.
do the math. How many family sedans does it take to move that block?
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
No, here's another thing, Russ. You did statics in college.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, you tie a rope to a stone,
Yeah.
and you grab the rope, and then you're planting your feet on the ground, and then when you actually, let's say it just takes 200 pounds of force to move the stone laterally, just to slide it.
Yeah.
What is the static pressure of your feet on the ground with your own weight of 200 pounds when you're leaning back and you've got, you have this
Yeah.
this acute angle between you and the stone?
Yeah.
So you're putting the 200 pounds of force on the rope. What is the pressure you're now putting on the ground
Yeah.
beyond your 200 pounds? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. If you're
The static pressure. So if like that would be interesting to figure out.
Yeah,
It
because,
takes
like,
80
when you-
tons to move the block.
when
could
when you're tilted like that and you're like anchored to something, you can actually use your quads to put more pressure than you weigh.
way more pressure
Yeah.
than you weigh because
Right.
you have to exert that 200 pounds and you can't put your full weight on it because you're
Right.
not hanging under
Right.
it.
So you're actually adding a lot more pressure to the ground.
That's what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
Exactly.
So like these guys with ramps pulling or pushing are adding to their own
Force
weight
to the ground,
To the
yeah.
ground. So
So that ramp or whatever has to take even more. Force.
that's what I would like to see is like what's the average?
yeah, that's
like-
a good question.
So you take the simple 200-pound guy, 6 feet tall, pulling on a rope, and the rope's at say 4 feet, 5 feet.
Yeah.
At his chest area.
yeah.
What is the static pressure of his feet on the ramp? And then if it takes 800 dudes to do that,
Yeah.
what
The
is
other-
the force you're putting on that? This is
On
just
that road
like-
base. Yeah. The other problem is the coefficient of friction.
Exactly.
Once you get the block moving, it suddenly becomes a lot easier to move. And when it's that heavy, the coefficient of friction is massive.
tens of tons.
Right.
Yeah.
So once you get it moving, suddenly, the amount of force necessary drops by an enormous amount.
Yeah. It's
Right. And then the
initial-
block starts running over people.
'cause
Oh,
you can't
God.
stop it.
Because you can't stop the
Yeah,
force
once
you put
the
on it.
inertia is
right,
pulling,
exactly.
once-
especially if it was
no,
on
just
rollers.
not even inertia, just the coefficient of friction. Like there's a coefficient of friction where when something is pressed against something else, to initially get it started moving takes
way
a lot
more.
more
Right.
force
Way
than
more
to
to
keep it
break
moving
that-
once it's moving,
break
and
that
that is
friction.
based on inertia.
But that's what I'm saying. Once it's moving, now it has its own inertia.
Right. So the force level required to keep it moving drops enormously, and then suddenly people are falling down and getting run over.
And then you have like a speed bump on your roller. and then
That one little knot on that log. That
that's why they wore butt flaps, dude. Because like they're like, these guys in these massive mills where they're, these running these massive rollers and stuff like that. You can't have any loose clothing or whatever. Long hair, shave your head, man.
yeah.
People get sucked into that stuff.
It's like the power takeoff on a tractor.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
Old
probably why
Farmer
they wore
Dan got
they
they
wore
all
butt flaps.
in
dude.
by a
They all wore
sleeve
butt
and-
flaps so they didn't get snatched under the giant blocks.
Twisted loincloths.
Yeah, so Brett's pointing out like the Incans who tried to move the boulder in Peru and hundreds were killed. It was thousands. 3,000 people were killed when that block got out of control. Killed 3,000 people like that.
So there were 3,000 guys around a block.
Yeah, they were out in the open. And they had a lot more than 3,000 people there. I think they were saying that there were 20,000. Now this is like
That's insane.
it's apocryphal though, or legendary.
Yeah.
No one has been able to
Half the tribe died when
Yeah.
we tried to do this.
Yeah, this Incan king was like, we can move this, and it was one of the tired stones, what they call the tired stones, where it's like just on the road, in between
Like
the
just
quarry
left
and the
there,
site.
yeah.
Somebody dropped it and down tools and never came back.
Yeah.
And so he was like, let's complete the work of the gods. I'm like a god or whatever. Inca is, high one in
Of the gods, yeah.
in like Sumerian or something, but this is, it's Inca. That's what that means. Inca is like Sumerian word for high one or something like that.
Yeah.
But
Like
anyway,
Snake 5? High one?
yeah, Snake 5 is a high one. Yeah, Inca, Snake 5, it's all the same thing. Yeah, so they were gonna move this block, and there was an incline, and they were trying to get it up, slide it up this slight incline or whatever, and they got to a certain point and they lost control of it and it went
Just
backwards
slid
and
down,
just
yeah.
it crushed 3,000 people like that. So
Wow.
wow.
Industrial accidents. Terrible stuff.
It's terrible stuff. All right, well that was a fantastic Impossiblocks episode.
Yes. And thank you, GMA.
Yeah.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Can't wait to have you
Bringing
back.
in the
And
new
maybe,
year with Giant Block.
maybe future guest hosts.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I
Future
would not
stand-in
pass
host.
up the chance. Yeah.
In case one of us is into snakes.
Indisnakeable.
Into snakeable time. Stuck on the spikes on the side of the tomb.
Yeah. And you just gladded. Possibly.
You know, the only thing I can do is make sure I try and glad if I go out there in the world.
Yeah, so any of you listeners, whenever you're traveling, hit us up on the blog.
Yeah. Or on Twitter.
Or on Twitter. Like, where are you going? What might be there? Russ is the library of weird places and things in other places. So in totally normal places, there are incredibly weird things.
Yeah.
Hit us up. We may be able to point you in a direction to do some reconnaissance for the podcast and send us some pictures. That would be awesome.
Or even get you on the show if you want to come on and talk about what you saw.
Yeah.
Like, we like to do that. But this is a game for me. I love it. Like, people are going somewhere. I'm like, where are you going? You driving? You want to go to weird shit?
Somewhere?
And then we'll start telling them like places they could check out that's nearby their route, So.
Yeah, that's what I've been doing is having to go somewhere for work or vacation, whatever, look up. Okay, is there anything snake-like?
You don't have to look anything up. Just give me a call, buddy.
Sure.
Yeah, but be careful when you're doing it for work. Like I did it. I went to Italy for work, and my boss actually asked me like, "Will you stop looking at obelisks?" Every time I found out there was an obelisk like a couple of blocks away, I would just bail. And there was like 10 of us, and I'm just like gone. It's like, where'd he go? Oh, he's looking at an obelisk over there.
Look at that rock over there.
And they talk about, can you stop looking at obelisks?
Classic. Sorry, man.
All right, so you guys can get a hold of us at brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com.
Check us out on the website, brothersoftheserpent.com, and comment there, and comment on the Twitter.
That's right. Comment on the Twitter. It's at SnakeBros, SNKBRS.
Snurkburst.
Check out the Encyclopedia and Glossary on the website, too.
Yeah, and make sure to share the shows if you get the chance.
That's right. Don't forget to donate to our pyramid scheme and give us $1 million.
Or one. Pinky to the lips.
That's right. $1 million.
And please, reviews help very much. Spread the good word of the snake tongues.
That's right. And thank you guys very much for being listeners. We love you so much for that. And thanks to GMA once again.
Thank you.
Good night, Adamu.
Always on the snake brow.
Don't try to move Impossiblocks.
Thanks, everybody. Oh,
Bring it back.
Happy New Year!
Thanks to the Watcher.